You're listening to mechanic.com.au podcast, Australia's #1 podcast for automotive service and repair professionals. This week's podcast is proudly brought to you by Exedy, #1 for clutch. I'm your host, Jason O, and today we're joined by Mark Davis, who is the Senior Product Manager for Exedy. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Jason, thank you. Nice to be here.
And how was your weekend, mate? How was your weekend? Did you have a good one?
Going well, mate. I'm located in Melbourne and we enjoyed some drizzle and some cold weather, and I was trying to build a fence. So, yeah, mate, it was a good experience.
I was trying to build a bridge to get over how bad the Crows are going this year. So, mate, I think we were both building at the same time and just in different emotional states, I think. That's what it would have been.
Jason, that's going to be a big bridge to build,
trust me, I'm investing a lot in it. Hey, today we're talking about the past, present and future of clutches. And this is a really cool topic, so let's jump straight in.
Sure.
Why was there a need for clutches in the first place?
Well, I think you'd probably recall seeing some of that really early footage of very early vehicles where someone would crank the engine over, get the car started and have to jump in quickly because there was no way in that time of disconnecting the power from the engine to the drivetrain. So I think, in the late 1800s, early 1900s,
yep.
There was some discussion about this, thought about this, and some guys came along with a bit of an idea of, a leather belt with some pulleys, and it'd be attached to a hand lever, and they'd use that this kind of method of disconnecting the power from the engine to the drivetrain. So the kind of more pressure you applied by hand, the more power that was transmitted to the rear wheels. So that was kind of the very early sort of pre-clutch technology.
Back in those days, I reckon the leather industry would have been going through just untold fortune because we heard earlier that leather was used in early suspension systems, and now in clutches. It's incredible. It was an engineering marvel that product back then. But how did Exedy Australia get into clutches?
So Exedy, we trace our roots back to Japan. So
okay.
We're a Japanese subsidiary of a Japanese organisation, and our Japanese parent company started business in 1923.
Yes. And
they were repairing very early clutch components back then. And we trace our roots here locally back to 1986.
Yes.
Where we had a group of a few local guys who had a local clutch importing distribution business. And back in 1995, as they were known then, Daikin Clutch Japan, Daikin Clutch Manufacturing came to Australia looking for a local business partner. And they spoke to a few different organisations and thought there was, the best synergy with our founding fathers, our founding members. And in 1995, Daikin Clutch Australia was born.
Wow.
And actually this year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary in Australia.
That's fantastic. That's absolutely brilliant. And did Exedy Australia have any involvement with the initial creation and innovation of clutches? I mean, obviously, being this wide brown land, there would have been something we would have been able to contribute.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Jason. So obviously, the clutch concept has been around for a lot longer than Exedy Australia, but Exedy Japan, we look to Exedy Japan. That's as our, they're our parent company. That's where our products are predominantly manufactured, where most of the R&D does occur. But we found that there was a requirement for a specific range of products for our local market. So we established our we have a local assembly facility in Melbourne, and we've developed a range of our sports and performance products, our Sports Tough range for modified vehicles, guys who are looking for something a little bit better than a standard clutch. And so that development has occurred in Australia, and also we've kind of been at the forefront of our single flywheel or single mass flywheel development program. So that's where we had customers coming to us who had a dual mass flywheel in their vehicle, and they were working that vehicle in a really challenging environment, and they were looking for something a little more robust. And we were able to go off and develop a number of single mass fly-one clutch combinations that
Wow.
would work in those challenging environments.
Well,
So, as I say, while we leave most of it to our engineers in Japan, there is, and we have some ongoing input into projects each month up there. So, yeah, it's been good to have that feedback from local customers. Yeah.
yeah. And where did the Exedy Australia name come from? What's its meaning?
So, formerly Dakin Clutch Manufacturing. So back in 1995, whilst we changed our name from Dakin Clutch Australia to Exedy Australia in 2000, actually globally in 1995, Dakin Clutch were thinking about modernising the image of the company. So, um, I still get the question, what's Exedy? How does it relate to Dakin? And often the simple explanation is that it's one and the same company.
Okay.
And Dakin Clutch went through this modernisation program and decided on the brand Exedy, which is just the shorter version of two words. It's excellence and dynamics.
Yeah, right.
And
It's
yeah,
right in front of you. There you go. Oh,
yeah,
that's fantastic.
exactly right.
I
And,
never knew that. There you go.
yeah, and it's we reassure customers it's one and the same company. We've modernised our name and our image and
Yeah, of
corporate
course.
image, and that our the senior managers in Japan thought that combination of those two words best embodied our philosophy to be the best and most dynamic organisation in our industry.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well, what did the first versions of those Exedy Australian clutches look like? I mean, we're going back a little bit of time now, but what were the first ones like?
Well, if we look at early Exedy Japan clutch systems, so since 1923 they were repairing clutches, but later in the 1900s, Daikin Clutch Manufacturing, we started building our first actual clutch assemblies was a spring and lever
Yeah.
type cover assembly, which is still utilised today in different applications, but fairly rudimentary spring and lever cover assembly with a solid organically lined clutch disc. So
Okay.
very, as I say, rudimentary, very simple style of clutch system, but did the job, was effective all the same.
Okay. And obviously, you've navigated through different materials on those clutch discs as you've gone through the years?
Absolutely. So with regard to the clutch disc, asbestos, it's a dirty word all around
Yep.
the world now,
It
but
happened. It was there. It's gone now.
yes, it's gone now, fortunately, which is a good thing. But asbestos is a very forgiving, as we found in the building sector, very forgiving, very flexible product to use in manufacturing. And so all the early clutch discs essentially were made from an asbestos based friction material. But as people became aware of its safety on the health and safety implications of using asbestos materials, Exedy developed a range of our own friction materials, and from about 1993, Exedy wasn't using any asbestos in any production any longer.
Well, evolution breeds, success from change and work, and that's obviously what Exedy did. They kind of moved on and moved forward. And
Mm.
you guys had many milestones that evolved, in the clutches over the years. What were some of the ones that you recognise?
Well, I think, if you talk about Exedy historically, Exedy was one of the first organisations to develop and mass produce a disc that had enhanced capabilities to dampen torsional vibrations.
Yes.
And, funnily enough, it was termed the anti-vibration clutch disc. But that probably, that leads into another kind of discussion point or topic where,
Okay.
it goes to your question, I think, of as engines have become more powerful, they've the development of and engineering has changed in the last 100 years to such a great degree that we've had to, as people that provide products that transmit torque smoothly from the engine to the wheels. As clutch manufacturers, we've had to come up with a range of products that will handle those increased torque, increased noise and vibration kind of range of issues. Develop a range of products that work well under those circumstances.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, you've got such a wide variety of different conditions,
yeah,
don't you?
absolutely,
You know?
absolutely. And if you're talking about specific the different kind of components, the clutch disc was a very simple design, 100 years ago, where it was a friction material and a splined hub
Yeah.
that would fit onto your input shaft. These days, clutch discs are they have quite complex design. So we have 3 and 4 stage dampers. We have, even with you think about the clutch cover, we've got development of the clutch cover from a spring and lever assembly back
Yes.
100 years ago to back in 1936, when GM patented the first diaphragm spring clutch. And then most manufacturers, once that patent expired in the mid 1950s, most manufacturers started manufacturing the diaphragm clutch, which was, had some inherent design improvements over a spring and lever clutch.
Yeah.
Namely, we could reduce the pedal effort, but maintain clutch torque capacity. And it was cheaper to make, so cheaper to,
And
for the
things
car
like
companies to purchase.
things like your release forks and release bearings, they have come along leaps and bounds, haven't they?
Absolutely. So, where we used to see release forks and release bearings being part of that release mechanism operation over the many years. They've made way now for what we term the concentric slave cylinders, which is your slave cylinder that fits over your input shaft and mounts to the front of the transmission, and essentially does away with the release fork and the
I remember when I first saw one
pivot
many
fork.
years ago, I looked at it and I went, that's not going to work. And it did.
Yeah, well, it's quite interesting. We still think of it as in somewhat as new technology, but honestly, it's been around for 20, 30 years now, these concentric slave cylinders, and they've been adopted by car companies all around the world,
Yeah.
and they've become more common than the old style release fork and release
Oh,
bearing.
it's that old word
setup.
evolution comes up again, doesn't it? And
Yes,
speaking
yes.
of which, how did Exidy change? I mean, you probably had the bonus of being part Japanese, based in Australia. You had probably a lot of influencing factors going on at that sort of early stage.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So one of the big innovations from Exidy's side is what we'd term our wide-angle damper clutch disc.
Right.
So, to try to accommodate this wide range of noise and vibration concerns or NVH created by various different vehicles and vehicle manufacturers' engines, Exidy came up with this idea to create a disc that would be much better at absorbing and dampening those vibrations. So that the upshot of that, or the result of that, is improved cabin noise. Everybody's worried about how things sound. They don't want to hear anything clunking, and they want a good. When they're selling their cars, they want a really good a good experience from the vehicle
Yeah.
driver. So, the wide angle damper disc it has a much higher or much greater angular rotation than conventional discs, and it is much better at absorbing that NVH. So, we see that being used in a lot of our clutches to this day, diesel applications, but also petrol applications, and it's been quite successful.
Yeah, speaking of today, I mean, I kind of remember back in the day where, twin clutch, multiple clutches was the stuff of race cars. But now we've got, 2CT and we've got DSG gearboxes. What do modern clutches look like today compared to what they did back then?
Yeah, well, I think the main function of the clutch, Jason's kind of remained the same. And the early diaphragm, push type diaphragm clutches, we still see that in the market, as that's the majority of clutches that are still utilised
Okay.
in our market and by manufacturers today. But as I guess an evolution of that, we've gone into self-adjusting diaphragm clutches, pull-type diaphragm clutches, which Exedy have pioneered again and utilised over the journey, particularly with higher output, high torque engines from Subaru WRXs and Mitsubishi Evos. But then, as an extension of that, in more recent times, as you've alluded to, we've started to see these 2CT twin clutches being utilised predominantly in the European sphere, European manufacturers, but we are seeing that in Korean vehicles and Japanese vehicles now as well. And these clutch systems essentially they're able to increase the speed of that we can that the driver can shift, and also improve fuel efficiency.
Well, with multiple speed gearboxes and fuel efficiency, that is the talking point at the moment. And the ability to get through the gears and get the car up to cruising speed to save petrol seems to be the holy grail at the moment.
Absolutely. And we're seeing, whilst it's still only in the 2CT technology is only utilised by a small number of manufacturers, we are seeing that grow year on year. It's becoming more commonplace, and it's a very interesting topic.
How have the materials changed and the technology changed? I mean, if we're seeing these new gearboxes coming in, does the material have to change as well?
Yeah, I think thinking about this particular question, the materials over the past, with the exception of the asbestos friction material, the materials haven't changed a great deal over the past 100 years. So,
okay.
Or even 50 years. So we're talking
with the exception of no asbestos, of course.
Yeah, exactly right. So we still have spring steel used in diaphragm springs.
Yep.
We've still got cast iron used in the cover assemblies, or pressed metal used in the cover pressings. So the materials, there's been some evolution within the materials grades, but the materials utilised are still similar to what they were 50 years ago. But if we look at how the, I guess, technology to control the clutch has evolved, I think the greatest change that I've seen is where we're starting to see these mechatronic units that are controlling, talking to the ECU and dictating when the 2CT clutch, changes up a gear or down a gear and the like. So I think, we see it a lot in the automotive space where there's development in the electronic area.
Of course.
This is what
Which
we're
seems
seeing.
to be taking over everything, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And we're seeing that now in the control of these clutch systems.
We speak to the suspension and brake guys, and everything in the future is electronically based. And we have a growing and diversifying car park, and I have no doubt that's going to affect the number of clutches available or the demand for different style of clutches. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've been with Exedy. I've been fortunate enough to be working with Exedy for nearly 30 years, and when I first hit the road and was out talking to customers and selling clutches, I kind of recall there was 10 kind of clutch kits that you'd need.
Okay.
And, we were talking your Geminis and your Corollas, Holden, and Fords and all that early stuff, and maybe a Hilux kit, if you're lucky. But now, the tail was quite short in terms of our ranging, but now we're looking at, I think, over 4,500 different clutch SKUs within our range. And
that's huge.
There's been a lot of diversification and change. And you only have to look at, the demise of, I guess, Holden and, the change in people's requirements for vehicles, moving away from the large, family car into SUVs and smaller vehicles and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just because the changes happen in the automotive side of things, it doesn't mean the testing is let up for anybody. What sort of testing do you guys do on the clutches?
Well, certainly our parent company, Exedy Japan. Exedy is a original equipment manufacturer, so they're supplying clutch products to the vehicle makers, and those vehicle makers have very strict safety and quality requirements, and those same requirements are adhered to for the aftermarket products that we distribute. So some of the tests that they'll do, Exedy, in terms of checking safety and quality, burst testing friction material. They're checking clutch disc damper durability, so they're cycling the disc damper back and forth for 3 million cycles.
Wow.
Clutch cover clamp load and release load testing, clutch disc distortion run out testing. And a lot of these tests are done on the line. So when we talk about the clutch cover function and clutch disc function, every single cover assembly, every single clutch disc that comes out of the factory is subjected to these tests. And if it doesn't meet the requirement, the safety and the quality requirement, then it kind of goes down another chute and ends up in the scrap metal bin.
I have this vision of somebody sitting in the factory with one massive big right leg and one very small left leg, just pumping the clutch all day long. Yeah. I don't think that's the case, though.
No, but it's an interesting point. Sometimes I hear people mention I must have got a crook clutch.
Yeah.
But knowing what goes into the testing before the clutch is released, that's hot. Yeah. That sort of situation is highly unlikely.
I reckon, during the tour down under, you could probably get a couple of those bike riders in to do a bit of durability testing. They've got some pretty big legs and quads on them.
They have, mate. Yeah,
let's go to the year 2040, mate. Let's scale ahead. Where are we going to be with clutches, and how do you think this is going to affect, the workshop owner and the mechanics? Where do you reckon we're going to be?
That is a very, very good question and a very difficult question to answer.
Grab the crystal ball, mate. Let's go.
I think, just by virtue of observation of where we've been and where we are now, I think certainly the clutch disc, clutch cover, release bearing, even, the hydraulic side of it, concentric slave cylinder, all of that is pretty old technology. And I think we've kind of reached the end of the serviceability of that technology in some of these new modern vehicles with electric motors or hybrid engines and the like. So I think, whilst I think we'll still see some clutch utilised by 2040, I think it'll be by a much smaller proportion to what it is now. And typically we see it in the clutch systems used in emerging markets and emerging manufacturers, but not in manufacturers that have a long history of engineering history and research and development. So I think by 2040 we'll still see some clutches in the market, a very small proportion. But my own feeling is we're going to be seeing more innovation in transmission. So I don't even think a traditional automatic transmission, I don't think we'll see that prevalent in 2040. I think it will still have a place, but there'll be technologies utilised that we don't see in the market today.
Just remember, Mark, all of this started out with a leather strap, so you just don't know where it's going to go. You don't know where it's going to go. It could go.
We might get back to that, Jason.
It is a very exciting time in the automotive industry. I do know that. But look, let's round this one out. What's one of the facts mechanics don't often know about Exedy Australia?
I guess one fact is, and it relates to the point that we're not just clutch. So a few years ago, when Toyota closed their manufacturing facility, our sister company, Aisin, they were looking for somebody to take over the distribution of their aftermarket parts in Australia, and they came, sat down and had a chat to us, and asked us if we'd be in a position to help out, and so. Yeah, we agreed. We thought it was a great opportunity for us to broaden our range, but also to learn some more about a different product categories. And today, we're the official agent for Aisin aftermarket parts in Australia and the Pacific. So,
wow, okay.
So it's been a great learning opportunity for us, and they're good people to do business with. So.
Well, speaking of learning opportunity, I have taken a lot away from this today, and I really appreciate you coming on the show today, mate. And I know a lot of people will be listening at home thinking I've learned a hell of a lot about clutches. So thank you, Mark, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Appreciate it.
No, that's all right. That's all right. If our listeners have any follow-up questions about anything we've discussed today, they can go ahead and reach out to Exedy via mechanic.com.au community. If you're not already a member of mechanic.com.au, join the thousands of other mechanics around Australia who are earning, learning and networking more at mechanic.com.au, the home of Australia's mechanics, by creating a free account today. Thanks for tuning into the mechanic.com.au podcast, Australia's #1 podcast for automotive service and repair professionals. If you want to unlock a whole host of trade-only resources, including our private community, competitions, educational content, job opportunities, training, troubleshooting, and much, much more, go ahead and create a free account now at mechanic.com.au. We'll catch you on the next episode of the mechanic.com.au podcast soon.